Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Vox Caster. I'm your host, Dan, and on today's episode, we'll be bringing you another Get to Know. Today, I have joining me Craig MacArthur.
Thanks for having me on board.
Well, thanks for joining us. So, on today's episode, we're going to get to know the Craig MacArthur in the world of Warhammer. So, pretty much start us off. How did you get into the hobby?
Oh, well, first, the Craig MacArthur. That's pretty.
The Craig
Yeah.
MacArthur.
Wow. Well, a lot of people nowadays have been in the hobby for quite some time. Myself, actually, I started off as a fantasy player. I started off back in the early 90s, 93. At the ripe age of 13. Yeah, 13, I would have been. I remember going to a little shop that doesn't exist anymore here in Moncton. It was called Thousand Comics, and they actually had way in the back. They had some of those lovely little box sets and the little, everything was metal back then. If you saw something plastic, it was a rarity. And I remember just buying miniatures to paint them. For me, that was a huge thing. I started painting them, and I'm Empire guy. For any of you that have played with me, you've seen all the feathers and pantaloons on many occasions. But for me, painting and getting the miniatures together was a big thing for me. Then all of a sudden, I realized, hey, I actually have some stuff to play with. And then I picked up the box. I think this would have been fourth editions. This has had the high elves and the goblins. It had the archers and the spearmen, and for the elves, and it had the little cutout because they didn't want to blow the budget and actually give you a miniature of the bolt thrower. You just got a cardboard cutout. At least it was color, so it was that much. It was good stock. It lasted. And then you got the goblins, which the spears are sharp, and you would usually lose blood. If you're diabetic, it was a great way to get your blood at the end of the day. And then you had all, and they were all in that great little static pose, all looking up into the sky, shooting their arrows. So anyway, so I had that, and me and a buddy of mine used to just play on the floor as kids, and we just play that. And I remember another buddy that got in, and he'd have his old man's pool table, clear all the balls off of it, and we just play because it was green. So we're like, sweet, it's grass. Like again, we're 13, 14. Everything was improvised, and if it was cheap, it was better. So yeah, the steam tank, that thing, I remember that thing. I still have it. I still have most of my models, but the steam tank, that was a fun one. That thing is weighs more than one of my cats. It's a brick, but it was fun. It was really a fun time to be in the hobby. It was obviously nowhere near where it's at now in the sense of popularity, but we also didn't have the resources. You didn't have podcasts like this or things online. It was just,
Yeah.
word of mouth. And I remember going to Gamezilla, a store in Moncton as well, and eventually saying like, look, can you order these? Because I was ordering some stuff online, but I kind of didn't want to have to order online because I didn't want to bother my mom to try to see like, hey, can you do this and that to order? I could just bike up and go get it. So anyway,
Yeah.
they eventually started carrying it, and kind of never really played in any tournaments. I just played with friends, and I'm not a super competitive person, as most people know. I like playing for the fluff. I love the lore. I read the novels. I still have all the old books. That to me is a big part of it, and that's one thing that Games Workshop has done really well. Is for 40K, all the horsey heresy stuff and fantasy before Age of Sigmar came around, they had all the lore, and even Age of Sigmar now, they've really started to evolve on the lore. So that was a huge part. But as time went on, and I got older, and next thing I know, I started kind of just getting involved. And once university started, I kind of got away from it. But then when I started working, da 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 da, and fast forward several years and moved back to Moncton and started working at one of the local hobby stores, Gamezilla, all of a sudden I was kind of placed into this role now that I was kind of actually able to share that hobby and teach people how to paint and how to enjoy the hobby side of it and also enjoy the game side of it and blend the two together. Because like I said, I didn't have that when I started off. I just painted, and I kind of had to fumble through. So I was excited that I was actually able to help people and give them the opportunity to get involved and see this game and see what it can do. And we had a really great community, and a lot of people are still friends, decades later
Mhm.
because of that little community. And some of them that started were quite young when they started. They were teenagers themselves at that point, and now they're older, have kids and all that stuff, which means that I'm no not spring chick. But the thing is that it really showed what the game could be. And that's what I really have strove towards over the 30 some years I've been doing this, is the community aspect. And that can be said for any game. That's the whole idea of a game, is the
Hmm.
community side of it, is that sharing of something that you enjoy with another person and creating a friendship or bond. And in some case, potentially a frenemy, depending upon how vocal you are about the game, and winning, losing, etc. And tensions can get high and the drama can start up. But anyway, that can happen in
But like
anything.
you said, that's any game.
Yeah. So for me, that was a big part of about the game that I really enjoyed as I got to that aspect of it. Because like I said, there was different parts of the game that I got to enjoy, which was getting into it, starting it, playing it, but then getting to be more of a ambassador, I guess.
Hmm.
It makes it sound more regal than a plastic pusher. Because in a store, obviously, you want to sell things, you want to move
Yeah.
things. But I also, from my point of view, wanted also people to play against. I want to have games against people. So, as time went on and people start playing and liking it, I go, wow, this is really cool. Well, here, why don't you read this book? Have you
Hmm.
read this book? Do you know this existed? Do you know that there's this really cool story behind that little miniature you're playing? I didn't. And then all of a sudden again, it's, oh my God, this is phenomenal. Um,
This is the same strategy you used on me. This story kind of sounds familiar. Yeah, are we talking about me now?
exactly. Yeah. I sucked you into this hobby over the years. All the money that you spent, your wife can thank me for that.
And she will be
Um,
listening, so don't say
yeah.
amounts, okay? Okay.
Yeah. Peter Colosimo, the Falcon, he's a friend of mine. We've known each other for quite a few years. I'm the gentleman that helped introduce him. He obviously far surpassed any skill level or knowledge level that I ever had or imparted on him. But sharing that interest in lore and hobby with him, he gravitated towards that right away. And he also had that same desire and passion for community, hence why he's doing the 40K Sat Center and all the different things, because he really enjoys the hobby, but he enjoys the community and sees the value of how the community, it's more than just playing a game. It's people that are there for one another, supporting each other, sharing ideas. And now with Instagram and all the different things, they've been around for a while, but just in the sense of
Hmm.
like sharing painting ideas, like the fact that I can sit down and talk from some guy from England, or I can talk to some guy from New Zealand, or some guy in Germany about, hey, that's really awesome. How did you do that technique? I don't know how to do that. And it can share these different things, type of ideas. So a lot of different things from the hobby has sprung up over the years from that. So I've kind of spanned several years at once, but it's been interesting to see how the hobby can really change, and what kind of involvement you have. This isn't just a matter of I picked up some little plastic guys and I'm throwing some dice on the table and I'm crossing my fingers. They're not all ones. Um, and here in Moncton, for those of you who aren't familiar with me or what I do, I've been that guy that, or I'd like to think that's how I'm perceived, and maybe some people will tell me very differently. And by all means, there's comment sections somewhere in there, and be gentle. But I've been trying to be that guy that I would show you the game. I'd get you introduced to the game, how to play. After that, you're on your own. Do your own
Hmm.
thing. If you were really, really geared for tournaments and different things, go for it. Because I help run tournaments in this area. I've been very fortunate. We did Morks last year. Morks was kind of the first big tournament that we've done on the East Coast, to my recollection, anyway. In that we actually had the provinces working together, because as an Atlantic province, there's enough of us to do things, but separately, not so much.
Hmm.
So we finally kind of got to work together. Alex Harris is a gentleman in the Frenchionary that helps support and does really well with getting tournaments on the go. And he's running some now. And I do my little side of things and kind of help support there as well with the tournaments. But yeah, I don't know. It's just fostering communities, and the Level Up Wargaming that's in Moncton. The community reached out and asked for support. They wanted to run their own club. They wanted to be responsible for their own community, as opposed to relying on any store that has an opening and closing time, that have customers they have to look after, that they have other things that they have to look after, just Warhammer. So this provided an opportunity for me to support the community a different way, which is really awesome. We're running for over 3 years now. So that's great that we're still hanging in there. But it's interesting because we've had the community grow in a lot of different ways, and a lot of people that I haven't seen in years that have come back to get into the hobby, and people brand new, they're hopping into the hobby as well. But it's allowed more versatility to basically take ownership of what you're doing, the game you play, the game that you love, the sharing of ideas and making things work. Part of this podcast as well. This is something that you're doing, but obviously you're doing it because you have a love, a passion for the hobby. You're not doing this just for something to do on a Monday night or Saturday night or whatever night. You do it because you enjoy the lore, you enjoy the hobby, and that's a big thing. So a lot of people that do any hobby, it's that passion that's there. So that's a big thing, and I try to help people keep that passion going anyway. So.
And it's people like you that make us enjoy this hobby so much. Like I said, if I would have went to Joe Blow's store and, like you said, seen the Warhammers, like, yeah, they're aesthetically pleasing, but it was talking with you over months, or it was even up to a year before I took the dive to actually buy my first model. But it was just watching you play the game, and then like you would show me some, like you were saying, it's like, all this model with the book, like I was saying, joking a while ago. But it's true. It's like that's how I got into it. I started reading more of the lore. I started reading some of the stories before I actually dived into it. And it was just that love for the game, just build and build and build because of the community showing you it's like, this is a great game. And the people you're playing with just make it that much more enjoyable. So it's thanks to people like you that actually make people enjoy this hobby.
Well, that's appreciated, because that's the hope. Because when you look at any game like GW is not perfect. It's a company. They're obviously trying to make money, and that's the way it is. And once you accept that, that's a big part of it. But if you see the value outside of that for what I've previously talked about, having the games, having some fun, relaxing, go for it. Yeah, you know what? Sometimes, you got to spend a bit of money, but the thing is that you don't have to go crazy. Once you have an army, you have an army. I still play miniatures that are older than some of the people that are playing now. Um, but that's because there's still a purpose to that model. It can still be played. The rule books changed. As I said, I was a fantasy player. I played fantasy right up to the end. I played it from 93 on. 40K, I came into it later. I've found actually a new appreciation for 40K. I'll be honest. I know it might be heretical to say it, but it took me a while to warm up to 40K. But then once I started to see some of the novels and start to actually read the Horus Heresy and have that quote unquote historical point of view of 40K, that made me enjoy the game more, because now this isn't just a game that they've pushed me. They've actually created a wealth of knowledge, a background, a backdrop behind everything. So playing campaigns, different things of that nature, to me, that's also a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun to make those.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get people and you can see them all of a sudden light up at the idea of doing a campaign, that's great. The big challenge is that when you get too many people who do campaign, because you're just like, oh crap, how am I going to do this with 20 people? Like doing D&D, and you're dungeon master, doing a campaign for 4 or 5 people. Oh, okay. Oh, I got to do this for 15 people. That's a lot of people going to the bar or doing inappropriate things, or all the same things that everyone does every time they go to a D&D campaign.
Yeah.
But with the campaign ideas that there's been a lot of great tools out there, and if you ever want to do stuff like that, there's a lot of great resources. You just got to dig and be willing to try things and fail it, and then do it again and learn.
Because yourself and myself, like, we've tried a couple of those campaigns, and we've tweaked a couple of things ourselves. But like you said, you make it to how you want to enjoy it,
and then the edition changes on us, and then we got
then we start all over again for like the 5th time.
But the Crusade thing, I'm enjoying. The Crusade component of 9th edition, I think there's a nice balance there. It definitely gives a great structure. So I'm looking forward to trying to do that. And the thing is a lot of our members at the club are really enjoying it. They're actually, I've never seen this many people want to play games that aren't tournament based
Mm-hmm.
or competitive based, which makes me very excited. Because, like I said earlier, I'm not a super competitive guy. To me, this is a game, have some fun. When you can turn it into a competitive moment, yeah, gloves off, min max everything, get all the right synergies going, buy everything that you need to stomp their basically any life or hope or joy out of your opponent. Go for it.
Just crush their
But
dreams.
yeah, you don't need to crush your dreams every time you play.
No.
So that's the thing. It's finding that balance, and you know, I've been criticized over the years by some people for promoting that, because there's some people that are very much the opposite belief of me, that basically it's a game, it needs to be competitive. There's an idea, basically it's you versus that other person, but it doesn't always have to be that, and that's something that I've tried to impart to everyone, that you know, you can have some fun along the way. You don't always have to be this, but at the same time, the hope is that during that fun, you're going to learn from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to see things that you're not never going to see, because you're going to play an army that you normally wouldn't play against, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We do have a lot of Marine players, like everywhere has a lot of Marine players.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people that have other armies as well, and we get to talk, and we can kind of shoot the breeze and have that more of that dialogue. Whereas, again, this is not disrespect to any retail environment, but you're a retail environment, you're a business. If we're sitting there playing a game and all of a sudden you look up, oh my God, they're closing at 9 o'clock and it's 8 o'clock now and we just started, there's a different stress. So the
Mm-hmm.
club's been a very interesting dynamic, and some people may like, well, you know, why? For here in the Atlantic side, this is something that's very unheard of, of having a community outside of a retail, whereas in Europe and other spots, it's quite normal for a club to exist in coexistence with a retail store, and then you work with the retail store,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to relying solely on them for the gaming space and the product and everything. So it's been definitely a learning curve, but again, it's really great because it brought a lot of people together to make this happen. We have a lot of people that are wide spectrum of ages, demographics, backgrounds. That's the other fun thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone that plays this, it's not one type of person. So yeah, so it's really interesting to see from that point of view, and I kind of guess diverging a bit from who I am, but kind of where, you know, that all kind of ties into what I've been trying to instill in the community and the group. But yeah, Warhammer has that, and you see all these big tournaments now, and you, before everything happened with COVID and all that,
Yeah.
you know, fun stuff. Some like the big tournaments that were happening, and like 40K stats that are other spots too. I'm not trying to plug them. I know you guys. Good job. Um, but the fact of the matter is that there's so many of them happening, and these guys, you're getting to know their names. They're starting to become household names, and you were learning from how they were playing. And a lot of these guys, they're super competitive, but they were really good people. And that's the other side of it. Could show that you don't have to be hyper competitive and be a dick. You can
No.
be competitive and be a human being as well. Because the thing is that we want more people to be in the hobby. We want more people to play the game, not for GW's pocketbook, but more for us to have that variety of personalities, that variety of people to play against. Because there's nothing more exciting too than just sit down before a game. Oh my God, look at that model. What'd you do to it? How did you convert it? Where'd you get those bits for? What'd you do? I never thought of that type of idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how that side of it too, especially when you start getting people from other communities playing, and then all of a sudden you have this different mindset that kind of starts intermingling together, and you start going, oh wow, we never thought of that, maybe we should try this, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been a lot of the fun. So how it is now and how it was when I first started off is very different, because it was, you know, you got so excited to see one person to play Warhammer against, like basically my friend. I'm like, look, I've got all this stuff, can you play with me, like, please. And now it's a much different environment where everyone's on board, so yeah.
Mm. No, and that's the thing when it comes to just Games Workshop, or like you were saying, any game in particular. It's like the community will make it or break it. Or like I said, like I've had many times where like essentially like we play each other just over and over and over and over, and it's just like because we enjoy the style that we play against each other. But like I said, it's fun going to the local club and seeing, again, I'm talking pre-COVID, you have 20 people in the room and just 10 games going on, and it's just anything from Age of Sigmar or 40K, and it makes you just love the game that much more, just to see how happy it makes other people.
Well, and even diverging from Games Workshop products, or whether you're looking at Infinity or War Machine, Hordes, different things like that. Um, there's different things that they bring to the table as miniature, but I find that sometimes too the type of dynamic that comes along with some of those games is interesting, and it's just funny because like you boil it down, it's all plastic or metal miniatures that you're painting to play in the game, but it's the rule sets, the lore, and even with the changes that happened between fantasy, the Age of Sigmar, the overall concept is still there, the enjoyment
Mm-hmm.
is still there, and that look is there. But yeah, I don't know. It's I agree. It's exciting when you go in, and it's just that feeling of belonging as well.
Mm-hmm.
You go in, you're just like, hey, you go into Cheers, and everyone says Norm and
Everybody
etc.
knows your name.
Yeah, exactly. And when you go in there, and even if I've seen a few new faces in the club, and you have that bewildered look of kind of that deer caught in a headlight, but also that like, wow, like look at all the tables, look at all the terrain, look at all the armies. Like people, there are people that are playing. There's others like
Mm-hmm.
me out there. Like
Yeah.
like there's that acceptance, which is really cool, especially even more now than anything because everyone's been isolated, et cetera, et cetera. It's exciting
Mm-hmm.
to know that there's people that share an interest the same as you, and that you can share your ideas and vice versa. But yeah, we've had a lot of new faces lately because people are trying to find things to do, and just really trying to get into the hobby, and all of a sudden it's just like this is awesome. and
Mm-hmm.
and with ninth edition, a new edition is always exciting and sad because sometimes you're going to say goodbye to things the old edition, and you're going to be saying goodbye to money with the new edition. But at the same time, though, it gives a great leaping point for all the new people. But also, it becomes a challenge for some people like me that have played through too many things and start mixing the rules up because we're just forgetful, but that's life.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I don't know. So over the years, it's just something that I've played, and just kind of naturally became a dad to some people, I guess, and in the community, and how we play. Am I by far the best? No, never have been. Never. I've never claimed to be. I just like to think I'm just that nice guy that's just trying to make sure that people are enjoying a game that I've enjoyed, and I've got a lot out of it because I got a lot of great friends and a lot of great contacts over the years out of it. So from that, kumbaya moment of things, but I've also had a lot of just casual nights, listening to some tunes and painting some miniatures and just loving it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people that despise the hobby side of it, but to each their own. But at the same time, I also, I have models that I've had for 20 years that are still waiting for some paint. Um, the old conundrum of buying before you finish painting, but that'll always be an issue.
It's
So
always
yeah.
going to be an issue. All right. Well, where you say you've been in the hobby for such a long time, so here's a task I have for you. Let's see how far back you can think of. What armies have you played? Let's start back right from the fantasy. You said you had the whole elves and goblins, but from there on, so what have been some armies you've dabbled in with?
My main army and the one that's dearest to my heart is the Empire, as
Mm-hmm.
many will know, and it always will be. But I've had a High Elf army. I've had a Goblin army because I evolved both of those armies beyond that box set.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time went on, kind of parted with them or kept certain things. I've had a Warriors of Chaos army that was Nurgle slash Slanesh themed. Um, Never really ventured to any of the armies outside that. Oh, I did have a Bretonian army. I remember, and Lizard, because there was a box set that came out that had the Bretonians and Lizardmen. I remember buying that box set. I didn't really evolve past the box set in this case. But I remember getting the box set just because it looked cool at the time and all the horses. And then I started painting it, and then I realized how much I disliked painting heraldry to that extent. So that kind of like, you know what? I'm not complaining about the pantaloons anymore on the Empire men, especially those little metal ones, and they had all the pantaloons, and you're just sitting there painting stripes for days. Um, but yeah, trying to do the Herald dress was like, nope, 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 nope. So that ended quickly, but a few friends had bought me some gifts and kind of to add to it. Right before Fantasy did the switch over to the Age of Sigmar side of things, I was actually starting a Wood Elf army, and it wasn't really to play. It was I would have played it, but it was more to paint because I really just wanted something different. And there's no tree men that came out, and there's some great models that came out for the high elf army I was looking for. So I started painting some of those. Um, I never had. I had a little bit of Skaven, but it was more just because a buddy gave them to me, and I just painted them and gave them to him. But I remember assembling the Doom wheel because they were having trouble with it because it was the metal Doom wheel, and that thing was just a clunky old thing. And I think in Moncton, I think I've assembled anyone that owns the Dark Elf Hydra model, the metal one. I
Yeah.
think I've assembled almost every single one in Moncton, and I've pinned it and drilled it because people couldn't get them to hold together. And then I had done it for one person, and I was like, "How'd you do that?" And I'm like, "You do this so that it doesn't fall apart, and use the right glue." And so anyway, so like I see a Hydra now, and I just get like, "Oh," I'm like, I think I put you together. So I'm like kind of like this father to the Hydra as this kind of this weird thing. I've created all the little Hydra models in Moncton.
You should have started putting
Um,
your initials on the bottom foot
I should have just to see like when they're going around. What who's the CM guy? Why is it carved on the underbelly of all these Hydras? Um, so that would be the ones I've had. But again, like I said, the Empire one is the one that like I anything was Empire it came out, I got it.
Mhm.
I bought it. I loved Empire. But again, because the story was great and I really enjoyed it. For 40K, I had started. Oh, can't remember when I started now. This was quite a long ago. I remember starting and I started collecting Marines. I know everyone gets Marines, but I did Raven Guard. And then I realized, yeah, I'm not really enjoying this. This isn't my jam. I'm having trouble getting behind all these things. Like the steam tank was fun because it was just this quirky little thing. But actual tanks, you're kind of boring. You're just this brick. Like you don't have. There's nothing fun about you. There's no guy on it doing these cool things with like repeater bolt pistols. Just didn't have the same flair.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I kind of lost interest and I sold it off. And then I got some Imperial Guard thinking, well, you know what? They're kind of like the Empire. But then I realized, I got to buy all these tanks. I can't really make this work with guards because apparently at that point I didn't really understand that they just had a bunch of flashlights they were just putting in your eyeballs. So I was like, oh, well, this was a bad move. So then I sold them. Then I never touched any others because I know this is awful. I don't really the Xenos armies really aren't my thing. I don't like bugs, so I wasn't touching Nids. Necrons, they look gorgeous now, but back then it was just like I like Terminator, but I didn't want to have all these little Arnold Schwarzeneggers running around the paint up. Um, the Eldar, all that stuff. I just found the models they weren't my favorite, and they're still aged. But so I was like, yeah. So I never really got into those. Then when we opened the club and 40K really became the thing because Age of Sigmar was in this rocky point still. It
Mm.
had really kind of blossomed into where it's at now because the rule set was still basic and young, and it really hadn't had time to flesh out. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let's just make this 40K thing work because well, everyone's playing it. Eighth edition came out. It's new. Maybe I can kind of start. So I was like, let's do Raven Guard again because I like the lore. And there's some new models out at this point that had all the intercessors. I was like, oh, these guys look cool. They're big. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So it's kind of like a kid again,
Mm.
like all these cool little things. So yeah. So now I have the Raven Guard, and I started buying Imperial Guard because I was doing soup, but I was doing it for like the fun side of soup. So it never really worked well because of that. I was like, oh, I have Imperial Guard, and I want to get some sisters as well just to have like a little detachment of sisters for fun. That hasn't happened yet, but yeah, those are the armies I've had over the years. Now there may be one that I've forgotten, but I've also had like random stuff because with
Yeah.
fantasy you had all those gorgeous monsters. They had the Storm of Magic. That was something that everyone enjoyed. I really enjoyed it. I remember buying the Forge World book, and I don't buy Forge World books. No offense, Forge World, but I bought, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous book, and it had all the monsters in it. And anyway, that was something I really enjoyed because some of the monsters that came out over the years were really nice. I have all the old giants. I have a few different ones. There were some really cool expansions. Like I remember actually I have the Albion giants. It was like a pair of brothers, and it was like a little druid. I can't remember the story, but anyway, it was an interesting little thing. Dwarves. I had dwarves. Now I'm rambling, folks. I had a dwarf army for a while because I remember there was a female dwarf. It was one. There was never a female dwarf, and then they had this little mini storyline. It was like the drong of something, whatever. And anyway, they had this little female dwarf in it. So anyway, yeah. So I've collected a lot of stuff over the years, but I've also, you know, parted or traded with stuff over the years or given stuff to people just because I don't have enough space. So
And also
apparently,
you have your Gloomspite kits, forgetting your newest army.
well, yes, that's right. With AOS side now that things, as I was kind of mentioning when it was starting off, it was an interesting idea, but it hadn't really fleshed out. But now it's fleshed out. The game's a bit more stronger with the fact that the tournament stuff's been involved and the fact that there's actually more novels and stories and it's building up. And I decided to go a little bit different. And yeah, I went with the goblin. So kind of returning to what I did started with like 30 some years ago. And actually, I just picked up the troll hag about a week or so ago. Uh, so I've got to figure out how to put that together and paint it up and kind of not paint all the details on it because I have a 9-year-old that I don't really think I'd out to see that model. For those of you who haven't seen it, she's got grandma boobs, and the boys hang low, they wobble to and fro. Well, hers wobble to and fro, and she could easily throw them over her shoulders like a continental soldier. So that was a very interesting addition. Forge World, Games Workshop, whoever made that model, you really didn't need to put the details on the nipples like that. But hey, good on you. Slanesh was behind you on that one, I'm sure. So, but anyway, it's an interesting model. It's. I'm looking forward to kind of having that as my centerpiece around my little gobos. But I forgot how much work can go into batch painting because I haven't done batch painting in ages. Used to do that all the time with fantasy because you had all those troops. Age Sigmar, you don't necessarily have it, but with the gobos, there's so many gobos, and I'm like, but yeah, the models are nicer than they were back then, but they're still old gobbo models. And I think G Dubs, for some reason you're actually listening to me and actually paying attention to what I'm saying. I think it's time that you can get some new gobbo models out there. You can make some really cool kits with some robes and some stuff and a bit more versatility, or even make a kit just with mushrooms. Not ones that are consumable, but like plastic mushrooms. You have the skull, the box of skulls. You have all these other cool trinkets. A box of mushrooms would be really cool. And if there is one out there and somehow I missed it, by all means, folks, leave a comment and tell me that I'm a twit. And hey, there actually ones exist already.
No, like I said, you definitely have some history behind you, and like I said, we've definitely had our fair share of games ourselves going into 40K, Age of Sigmar, and like I mentioned earlier, it's like I was probably part of that story you were saying, getting those kids into Warhammer. I still remember building my first High Elf set and having our first games against your Empire. Um, but
You
no,
always strike first, silliness.
it's because of our pointy ears. We are swift.
Aerodynamic. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, 'cause you
But
played what? You had high elves.
for
What else?
fantasy, I went high elves. I stuck with high elves for a good chunk. I have lizardmen, and that's as far as I got with fantasy because I got in a little bit later because I think I only got in at the beginning of eighth. I want to say when eighth edition book came out was when I actually dived into the fantasy. And like yourself, I went more fantasy before I even touched 40K. And
Well, I found the thing is too, I guess, for myself, when I started, again, I was younger, and you know, either you're really into fantasy or you're into like the war stuff. I find like you're gonna be one or the other at that age.
and you're like you're myself. It's like I was just a fantasy boy growing up, so it was always the aesthetics of like the dwarves, the elves, the beastmen. It's like that's what caught my attention.
Yeah. Yeah, because like when I was like at that point, like I was playing like the old Nintendo games, Super Nintendo, like the Final Fantasy games, stuff like that. That was I love that. So fantasy stuff was great. So that's what really appealed to myself. Um, and at that point, the aesthetic for Space Marines wasn't really clicking for me at that point. Now I think because of where the models are at, and again because I've read the books and the stories and have a bigger appreciation. And when I'm looking at these models, like, oh, you're like so and so. Oh, I could paint you up to be this, and then all of a sudden, I create a narrative, and then my narrative just kind of crumbles in my head as I roll my first whiff of dice, and realize that all these little bonhommes that I've given names and had this great story in the back of my head and have written it all down, and the other guy's just like, I don't care. I've got a bunch of guns, and you're dead. Turn two. Then I'm just like, oh, but I still keep playing.
Yeah.
Why I'm not sure some days, but the dice gods one day will shine upon me. But
Well, see, your dice gods shine upon you a lot of times when you're playing against me. When your little chaplain guy, killed my hell drake in one round of combat.
well, it's not my fault that on the hierarchy of the dice gods that you're lower than I am because I'm pretty low. So whatever you did was worse than what I did. So sorry, but hey, it makes
I'm
me
still
feel.
trying to
But
figure that out.
But it makes me feel a bit better because then I'm just like, sweet, statistics don't matter in our games,
Nope.
and it's just yeah. So, but yeah, it's been interesting. My son, he showed a little bit of interest in it when he was younger, but um, he's kind of diverged on his own path for his hobbies and that's fine. There's days I wish that he would kind of have the passion that I had for that, but he does have it. It's just with other games. So maybe one day when he gets a bit older, maybe he'll entertain the old man and have a few games because at this point that to me would be really awesome.
Hmm.
But yeah, right now it's been a lot of fun though with the communities and playing and every so often looking at some of the old models and maybe dust off some of the old books and actually with I think it was back in April. Yeah, I think April. I pulled out some of the old fantasy books and was looking at some of the old like Luther Huss and uh, she Broken Honor. There was these great two books with some of the main characters for the Empire, and yeah, there's just a lot of great novels that I have on my book that I started reading, which kind of rekindles your passion for the game because your games allow you to bring that to life. So again, that's a big part of why I've enjoyed the game. I remember when I first started working at Gamezilla, the hobby store here in Moncton, the gentleman who I was replacing he was a big Warhammer guy, really well liked, great guy. He knew his stuff. He was smart, sweet fella. But he was the Warhammer guy at that time, and he kind of talked to me, and he was just like, I remember saying something. He's like, "Oh, you do play Warhammer?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh." I was so worried because like he thought that I didn't play. I was like, no, I didn't come here because I didn't I wasn't super competitive, and so I didn't do the tournament scene. But I said I do play, and then I started talking about the books. I said, "Oh, did you read this book?" And I started talking about the lore. Then all of a sudden, you see, I'm like, "Oh, okay, you're good. You know your stuff." So it was just kind of funny how that there was a community. There's different communities at that point, but I they knew I was getting stuff, but I wasn't actively a part of it because at that point the way the tournament scenes worked were very different back at that time. So it was interesting coming in and just kind of seeing how I was perceived at that point. And now, whether for better or for worse, most people that know me in the city know me as because of that hobby in that store. So kind of interesting how things change over time and what you become known for. So I guess there'd be worse things that I'm known for. So.
No, well, but hey, thank you very much, Craig, for telling us your adventures in the hobby of Warhammer. It was definitely great to hear all the experiences you had and everything you've done for a lot of people in the community.
Well, no, thanks for having me on. Hopefully, some of it made sense. And like I said, I don't know. I've been part of it, and I'll probably, as long as they keep making them, I'll probably still be in it until I can't do it anymore, I guess, or I'm not allowed to buy anything anymore, whichever happens first.
Depending on how big the pile of shame gets, right?
But, there's closets for a reason. People don't need to see the pile of shame. You just tuck
Just
it
tuck it
away,
away.
and then you have the shelves that have all the pretty stuff on it, and then that creates that false sense. Oh, look at all the stuff that he's done. Like, oh, geez, you got shelves and cases full of stuff. Yeah, just don't go in that one closet. It's for those of you. I don't watch a lot of Friends. My wife does, but I remember this one. It's apparently Monica's very particular with cleaning and all that, but she has that one closet that everything gets hidden in and everything gets jammed in there. And I remember Chandler wanted to hide something in there. I remember watching this with my wife, and she's just like, no. But I have one of those closets too, and that's where all the unpainted models go to hide. And the ones that I'm working on stay on my table, so it looks like I'm doing stuff. But yeah, there's lots that are hidden in that closet. No one's allowed to look in there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Craig, for joining me on this episode. Hopefully, we'll have you on some future episodes, and we'll talk to you soon.